Oh man. Okay, so I did double major, but then I minored in astrophysics, um, which is fun because I was actually going to use that at the intro. So well done. But if you know me at all or have spent any time around me in the dark, you know that one of my favorite things to do is go stargazing, which is a reason why one of the many reasons I wanted to go into aerospace engineering and study astrophysics is I love the stars. There was a group of us over by about an hour outside of Kansas City near a lake, and we were stargazing. It was probably like midnight, and I saw 7 shooting stars. It was awesome. I loved it. But when we think about the stars, like, I don't know if you look up and like think in the context of like the promise God made to Abraham, that thousands of years ago, God made a covenant with Abraham saying, your descendants are going to be more numerous than the stars. And that's like a pretty incredible promise for a man who was childless and was going to be childless for a while. But the thing about a promise is they're eternal. It's not a temporal, finite thing. It's really intended to carry life through you into the generations to come. So for Abraham, it wasn't just about having a baby, but it was a promise to ignite faith that would flow through Abraham into our life today. And you and I are part of that promise. We are part of God's covenant to Abraham, that we are like the sons and daughters brought into that covenant. And I would suggest that you and I are invited into a similar process, a similar promise. And like Abraham, there's a process from receiving the promise to the fulfillment of the promise. And I like to think about it this way. I'm sorry, you guys really, Lindsay, you just can't see me. Right, there we go, hi. But so sometimes I like to think about it this way, like our life is like a timeline of, I know, Rachel, I can still see the top of your head. Our life is like a timeline and like right now I'm standing at point A, and sometimes God will give us like promises that are at point B. And a lot of us, we want to think that it's like a really easy straight line from point A to point B. That would be nice, right? But it's not. It's an obstacle course. Why? Because God is mean. No, he's not. But there's a process that he invites us into in our life. And how many of you know that gifts are free, but maturity is expensive? Gifts are free, but maturity is expensive. And God wants to make sure that when that promise is fulfilled, that he's like grown you in the maturity to actually survive it and steward it well. We talked about trials last time, and in Sirach 2, I love this. It says, when you come to serve the Lord, prepare yourself for an ordeal, for a trial. And James talks about this, and it's in the first chapter of James. He says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, but let patience have its perfect work, that you might be mature and complete, lacking nothing. So there's a work of patience, the work of negotiating the trials of your life well in that obstacle course from A to B, and the fruit of that is that you lack nothing. So we are handed opportunities to mature in our faith, and it comes in the package of trials. But here's the thing, if we don't know our God, if we don't know who he is, like we are going to think he's mean. We're going to think he's cruel. We're going to think like, Lord, why are you allowing this to happen right now? This doesn't seem nice or fun or at all in the direction you said it was going to go when you showed me point B. But here's the thing, and I want to give us just a few things to walk through as we break open the journey and the process of strengthening ourselves in the promises of God. And the first one is we need to trust in the character of God. And so this is kind of a cheesy example, but I think it kind of works. You guys can let me know later if it did or not, but it's the best one I can come up with. So a few years ago, I was hanging out with my parents, which is really fun, and we were watching this like a period drama, so like something set in like the 1700s or 1800s. How many of you love those? Like big, I do too, big long dresses. Men, I think at the time you would have been wearing like basically leggings and like the knee-high boots and like some kind of jacket thing. So aren't you glad that the styles changed? Like I am, for your sake. But it was this period drama and this classic like guy meets girl, girl meets guy, they fall in love, but their families, I forget exactly, but like their families didn't approve. And her family was like gonna move, let's say the next day, and they're like, let's like run away together and get married. And so the audience sees all this, like there's a plan, there's a carriage that is set, they've like packed up all their stuff, and they have a plan. We're going to meet at the carriage at this time of night, and then we're going to run away together. So the audience watches as the girl gets there first, and she's waiting for him at the carriage. And then the audience also sees what she doesn't see, which is like on his way, he basically, like, it's kind of, TV shows, they get kind of weird, but it's like he's at a bar with a buddy, and he's like helping his buddy out, and somehow they get into a brawl, and then this guy ends up in jail. And so naturally he can't meet her at the carriage because he's in jail. We all know this as the audience, right? I know, but she doesn't know this. But what we see next is like she's in the carriage. He's supposed to have been there a while ago. He's not coming. He's not coming. And she assumes he's abandoned her or changed his mind. And she decides, I'm going to move away with my family and I'll never see him again. I was watching this and I was so mad. It's like, you do not do that. Like, you are supposed to love this man, and you automatically assume that he's like done something intentional to like abandon you or wrong you, right? Leave. Yeah, I'm mad too. Yeah. But I was thinking about this in context. It was funny. I was like, actually, genuinely, as I'm watching this, thinking about this in the context of my relationship with God. Like, how often do I do this? When I expect something to happen and it doesn't happen the way I expect it to, how often do I jump to conclusions that it's because God is holding out on me, or because he's changed his mind and he hasn't told me, because he's abandoned me, because he has some malicious intent or motive? How often do I do that? A lot. But I think something that the Lord loves to like grow us in the process of the obstacle course and the trials from getting from A to B, is that when something doesn't add up, and when I compare a situation to what I know of the character of God, then instead of drawing the conclusion that there's something about him that's changed, I draw the conclusion that there's something about the situation that I'm not seeing clearly. I don't build a theology based on what I don't see. I don't build a theology based on what hasn't happened. I don't allow what I don't understand to dislodge or dislocate what I do understand. And what do I understand? What do I know? The goodness of God. That he is good, and he's not just good, but he's good to me, and he's good to you. And this is a truth that I can hold on to, and that will be challenged in the process of the trials from point A to point B. But I can't sacrifice on the altar of human reasoning my knowledge of the goodness of God so that I have an answer for a mystery or a question. Another story I love to share is, if you have the I Believe in Love book it's like the retreat, this thing. Yeah, okay. I think it's page 102. I know that because I go back to it a lot, so you can look at it later. But it's a story about St. Monica and St. Augustine, who I think we mentioned last time as well. But basically, so we know St. Monica prayed for her son's conversion for years. But something I didn't know is that, like, in this story, the author highlights that, like, so St. Monica, for a long time, evidently, had been praying that her son would not go to Rome, because he was like close to her, and she thought, if he stays close to me, then there'll be hope for his conversion. So her prayer for like every day was like, Lord, let him not go to Rome, let him not go to Rome. But we know that when he went to Rome is when he met, who was it, St. Ambrose, who like brought about his conversion. So in the book he writes like that the Lord didn't answer the prayer that she was praying on that day, because he was answering the prayer that she prayed every day, which was, Lord, let him be converted. The prayer that she prayed that day was, Lord, let him not go to Rome. But the prayer she was praying every day that was deepest on her heart was, Lord, let him be converted. And so I would suggest that sometimes when we have unanswered prayers, it's because the Lord isn't answering the prayer we're praying that day, because he actually wants to answer the prayer that we're praying every day, which is the one that's like deepest on our heart, which is actually going to lead to our destiny. So I need to anchor myself and like maintain my position of trust in the character of God. See, we are designed to step into fulfilled promises. We're designed, you and I, we're designed to step into fulfilled promises. When God wanted to illustrate the process of maturity, in this, he took a nation out of Egypt, through the wilderness, into a promised land, a land of promises. But there's a couple things I want to highlight about the promised land, the land of promises. The promised land was not sitting on a beach, sipping lemonade the rest of their life. The promised land was a place where they had to work. And I remember this hit me recently, actually, where it's like, okay, so they're in the wilderness and there's manna raining down from heaven. So they don't have to work for their food in the wilderness. But they get to the promised land, that's not happening anymore. Like, there's actually a way that we have to, like, engage something in the promised land. And I think the manna is essential in our life. Like, I think the Lord takes us through periods of the wilderness where he provides for us supernaturally because he wants to strengthen our faith and our trust in his character so that when we enter into the promised land, like, we'll actually be able to, like, come and take it. Thanks. So the Lord rewards maturity with an increase of responsibility in moving from the wilderness to the promised land. Another part of this I want to highlight is that the promises of God, I believe, guarantee a fight between the promise and its fulfillment. And it actually requires our partnership and saying yes to the promises of God to step more fully into our design. So to take us back a little bit, let's go to Israel in the wilderness. So right at the start, before they were there for 40 years, Israel under Moses' leadership, they were looking out at the promised land, and they knew that this was like the great, vast inheritance that God had for them. So Moses sends 12 spies to spy out the land for about 40 days and to bring back a report of what they were about to step into. Because remember, God had said, I give this land of Canaan to my people. The Lord told them to go there and told them that he has given them the land. So the spies come back, and 10 of them say, there are giants in the land, and we are like grasshoppers in their sight. We can never win this battle. But 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, they come back from the land, and they're like, we've got this. It's a done deal. It's a setup by God for our victory. I'm paraphrasing. But we know this. The 10 spies that saw like giants and us as grasshoppers, they persuaded the crowd to move in fear. Now, no one in the crowd said, I choose fear. They all said, I choose wisdom, because fear can masquerade as wisdom. So this is in Numbers 14. I'm just going to read this quote. This is Joshua and Caleb speaking, I think. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only, this is great, only do not rebel against the Lord. So they're talking to all the people who are doubting right now. Do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. They are bread for us. How many of you know that God taught us to pray, give us this day our daily bread? And in Psalm 23, it says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. See, there's something about encountering giants that gives nutrients to us. There's something about encountering giants that gives us the nutrition we need to get to the next phase of the process, if you will. So often we're looking for strength for the battle, but I believe that most of the time God wants to give us strength from the battle. It's like the muscle we work in the weight room again and again and again. It's like it has to tear in order for it to come back and be stronger. And so sometimes we face the battle and we face the giants because the Lord wants to teach us something and grow our muscles in that. And you know your mind's renewed when you look at a giant and you see dinner. But here's the thing, I don't know, so maybe, probably not, because this is a room full of awesome people. Maybe some of you in this room are thinking, I would prefer not to fight giants. But I gotta say, it's what you were designed for. Fighting giants is how God designed it. We don't have to go looking for giants. Like, I don't necessarily want to go looking for the biggest giant, but I got plenty in my life. But I do want to clarify, this does not mean that every hard thing that comes your way is designed by the Lord. Absolutely not. Many of you in this room right now are facing things that the Lord has no hand in. There are things that bring life, which he has his hand in, and there are things that bring death, and he does not have his hand in that. But here is the guarantee, which he promises us. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. All things work together for good. And this is where we go back to step 1, which is trusting in the character of God. And there's a way, I think, that as we learn to steward the words that God has spoken to us, when we're at our point A and he speaks a word about point B, there's a way that we steward that by anchoring ourselves in the promises of the Lord. And I think Mary is a primary example for this. Like when it says she pondered God's words in her heart, words that the wise men gave her, words that the shepherds gave her, words that Anna and Simeon gave her, these prophetic voices from Israel who acknowledged who this 8-day-old child was. That was the Messiah. She took these words and pondered them in her heart. And there's something about taking the promises of the Lord and prayerfully meditating on them. Now, I think one danger is we tend to want to make them happen ourselves. But what we really need to do is to let the promise shape us so that we become people that can anticipate and can carry well the fulfillment of what God has declared over our life. So we sit and we ponder them. We put them in a safe place. We put them in a place where we can bring them up and review them. Like, how many of you have, like, and if you don't, I would encourage you, like, put a voice memo on your phone that you can listen to. If somebody speaks a word over your life, say, hey, can you record this? And I'll listen to it again later. Have note cards or know where they are in your journal and revisit them and soak in the promises of God. Because the promises are there to draw me into my future. God isn't obligated to make me fulfill my potential. He's not obligated to shove me into my future. But I partner with him. And the point is that I anchor my soul into his promises and I renew my mind with them continually so that I can think about my life and myself as the way that he does. Okay, point 3, don't skip the process. So we have another giant. And so another thing about me, I love stars and I love David. We talked about David last time. We're going to press into a story a little bit more, but we know the story of David and Goliath, don't we? Slingshot, stone, throws it at the giant. Giant falls down. Goliath is dead, cuts his head off. It's great. It's a really good story. But here's the thing I want to highlight. David killed Goliath when 2 nations were watching. This is like a pretty incredible responsibility for a young man. And he wasn't even supposed to be there. I was rereading it recently, and it's like he was in the field watching the sheep as a shepherd does. And his 3 oldest brothers were actually in the battle. And he's like going back and forth. I want to say like bringing them food. I might have that detail wrong, but he's going back and forth. And they're like mad at him, like, I know what's in your heart. You shouldn't be here, blah, blah, blah. But he knows that this is like a setup by God. This is where I'm supposed to be. And for like a young man to stand before 2 nations, he's not even invited to the party, but the destiny of these 2 nations are hanging in the balance. And he has a slingshot and a stone, and he runs at Goliath. Like, he runs at him. He ran at a big, large man who, like, nobody else wanted to, like, even go close to. And then we know he killed him, and there was victory. But what's the story? What's the story behind this? What was the preparation for that? Because he didn't just get there. Before ever David killed Goliath before 2 nations, he killed a lion and a bear when no one was watching. And he protected his dad's sheep. And let's see, I'm just going to pull it open here. This is what he says to Saul after he's killed Goliath. He says, your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and smote him and delivered it out of its mouth. And if he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and killed him. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and the Philistines shall be like one of them. And like, I just was imagining, like, gosh, maybe some of you are more bold than I am, but if there was a lion and a bear and I was like guarding some sheep, I'd be like, okay, maybe just take one. Like, I wouldn't want to, I'm like probably not going to say, yeah, I'm not going to do what he did, probably. But there was a hidden season of David's life where the Lord was preparing him for the battles that were to come, because he had like incredible victory for him. Like, God had incredible destiny for David. But I could probably guarantee you that if the Lord would have pulled David from the moment that he was anointed to be king and put him in the battle with Goliath, like, I don't know if that would have worked out so well. But the Lord anointed him to be king, and there was a process of working in the field. And this was even still in all the beginning of his story, is working in the field, tending the sheep, like being in the hidden place. And then like having to defend the sheep against lions and bears. And how many of you are facing lions and bears in your life? And you're like, this isn't like maybe the full Goliath, but it's definitely a lion or bear. But David's not doing this for applause. He doesn't do it because anyone else is watching. He's doing it because it's his assignment. It's his responsibility. And I think it's actually something in his character, in his nature, that God wanted to reveal. And this, I think, is something key that I have learned and continue to learn, is like oftentimes in my own life, I get to this place where I'm like, I can't do this, God. Like, you guys, I've been, in September of this, like right now, I celebrated like 8 years of walking intentionally with the Lord. That's like a long time, but also not really a long time. But in that time, there's been several seasons where I have said to the Lord, I can't do this. Lord, I can't do this. And that's like been my prayer to him as I wake up every day. Lord, I can't do this. Until I learned to start changing my prayer. Jesus, I can't do this. I need your strength. Jesus, I can't do this. I need your fortitude. Jesus, I can't do this. I need your courage, your kindness, your heart, your love, your mercy. Like, I needed him to change me. But what happened in these seasons as I was fighting small lions and small bears is that I get to see what I'm made of. Because then I have confidence in who the Lord made me to be, and also in him by the time I get to Goliath. And so I'm not questioning whether or not I can take down the giant, because I'm like, no, I saw the Lord and what he did for me when there was this lion and bear, and I didn't think anything good could come from it. And so now that Goliath is here, I'm like, yeah, we got this. So I think many of the situations we find ourselves in that are challenging, they're actually set up so that we will discover the extent of what we're made of. And then there's our personal history with God. Like David in the field as a shepherd, like he developed a personal history with the Lord. And that's not something that you can like inherit from somebody else. Like we can learn things from one another in our walk with the Lord, but the personal history, like that's what we got to lean back into. And you alone are responsible for monitoring your internal world and what's in it. And when it was established that David could be trusted with responsibility and with authority and with power, with the pressure that comes in a difficult situation, then God could put him before two nations that were watching, but not before then. So we need to learn how to draw strength from our personal history with God. It's the night that you couldn't sleep and you just got up to pray. And it didn't feel like victorious prayer at all. And it didn't feel like there was any kind of breakthrough. Samuel knows what I'm talking about, but it was written about in heaven. And that's the kind of breakthrough that brings us into the next phase. And I would suggest that like we care so much about the outcome of things, but God is more concerned about the journey. He's like, you skipped a meal and you came to talk to me instead. That's what I care about. You're probably gonna get the breakthrough, but this is what I care about. And I believe that there are seasons, and these seasons from point A to point B in our life where the Lord works diligently to prepare you for what he has prepared for you. He has great things prepared for you, and he wants to prepare you for those things. He says, I can trust this person with greater anointing. I can trust this person with greater authority, with greater breakthrough, with greater power flowing in and through their life, because in the moment of crisis, they set their face to seek mine. And I believe that the Lord is raising up a bunch of people, and our people included, that know how to pastor their internal world well. Because what is going on around you is affected by what you allow to go on inside you. And this is like really cool to think about. This was new recently as I thought of this. Like Jesus actually calmed the storm that he slept in. Why? I believe it's because he had peace in the storm. Therefore, he could speak peace, and the storm had to yield to the peace that was in him. When he released it, the storm had to obey, and you and I have that same power living inside of us, so we can actually affect our external reality by how well we monitor our internal reality. If the circumstances around me are stormy, That does not mean my internal reality has to be. I can be rooted and grounded in the truth of God and who he says he is. And maybe two final things, and then we'll end. There's a difference between contending for something and receiving as a child, and we need both in the journey. There's that verse about, like, somebody help me out, the violent take it by force. Anybody? That one. Look it up. Something, the violent take it by force. The what? The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. Thank you. And then later Jesus says, like, but you won't receive the kingdom of heaven unless you receive it like a little child. You're like, well, which is it, Jesus? Well, it's both. But it depends on the season and what he's doing, and you're only going to know because of personal relationship with him. The last thing I'll say is stay close to the front lines. I don't know if you all know, but you were born onto a battleship. And although I know we love cruise directors, but it's not a cruise ship. And if I just imagine that somebody's going to be coming around to bring me drinks all day, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. And there are moments of ceasefire, I'll give you that. There are moments of ceasefire where, whether it lasts weeks or months or however long, but the reality is the environment around you is still war. And I think we need to get our expectations right, because that changes everything. Because if I know that I'm on a battleship, then I'm not expecting for it to be easy. If I know that I'm on a battleship, then what do I do? Well, let's think about, if you're on the front lines of battle, what matters to you? Matters to you if you have ammunition. You're thinking about where your friends are, and you're thinking about maybe your next tactical move. But what if you're on the back lines of battle, or kind of living life on the cruise ship? You're wondering, like, what are they going to play in the mess hall tonight? What's for dinner? The air conditioning's kind of cold. Can we turn it down? There's just, like, your priorities are different. So we want to stay close to the front lines. We want to stay close to our brothers and sisters in battle. And primarily, we want to stay close to Jesus by continuing to strengthen ourselves in him. Because here's the thing. You were made for war. You might not feel like you're trained for it, but you were made for it. And that's the good news. And I think this journey, this process of going from point A to point B, is the Lord raising us up into maturity, which is expensive and costly and requires us to change and become more like him. But it's worth it, because we get to become more like him, and we get to conquer some pretty dang big and awesome giants for the kingdom.